I went from basically 6, 7 foot of snow where they bank it up onto the corners into huge cliffs of ice, basically, straight over to obviously the south of India, which is slightly different.
I want to talk a little bit about sort of what the day in the life is like, a little bit of psychology and a little bit about the day in the life. I know that you have become rather deliberate about abandoning the traditional 9 to 5 setup. So,
Yeah.
sort of take me through a day in the life of a traveling entrepreneur. I know that I looked at one of your blog posts and it was kind of
Yeah.
interesting. It looked like you were getting a lot of questions on, that exact topic. What do you do when you're in India for the day or Bangkok for the day while you're running your company? And you kind of posted something that I thought was really, really interesting. It started with, watching TED in the morning and then going for a swim and having some lunch and going to work and going to dinner and then going to a massage and then going clubbing at night, etc. Give me kind of a snapshot of what it's like. Is it like that all the time? Or what has your experience been like around running a company virtually while you're traveling around the world?
Well, yeah, the blog post that you talk of, that's quite a popular one. It was one that I wrote in answer to, like you said, quite a few people were emailing me and saying, okay, exactly how are you doing whatever you're doing? So I tried to answer that in that blog post, which was a day in the life of an entrepreneur. And basically, what I tried to get across in that is I'm a big advocate of testing the boundaries and testing creating your own life. So my average day varies very much from day to day and week to week. So the one that I wrote about, which was when I was living in Bangkok, I was really talking about the importance of structure. Because even though I think the biggest problem people have is the minute they lose, well, not lose their job or they ditch their job, they suddenly realize that actually being motivated and having a structure is probably critical to creating your muse, as you call it, or your online business or whatever it is. Because very quickly, without the structure of a job, everything kind of falls apart. So I'm very big on creating structures and frameworks that work. When I was in Bangkok, that kind of blog post was, yeah, pretty much the structure I had for quite a while out there. I tried to make sure I got plenty of reading time in. I watched a lot of TED episodes. I wanted to get the exercise in with a swim. I made sure I tried to keep some form of regularity on when I ate and got my social side in the evening. When I came back to England for 4 weeks, 6 weeks or so, then it changes slightly, and I start experimenting with different ways of working. So I might spend the day out and about, come back, start work at about 10 o'clock at night, work through till about 5 in the morning, and then crash till midday. And I do that for a couple of weeks and see how that works. I've experimented with having 10 hours sleep a night and seeing how that affects your work, and going all the way down to 2 hours a night for a week and seeing how that affects your work. I wouldn't recommend the 2 hours a week or the 10 hours a week. Neither are particularly helpful.
So you mean of sleep, the 2 hours of sleep or 10 hours of sleep?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, 10 hours is way, way too much. You actually surprisingly become more sluggish, I found, than when you have 2 hours. And if you have anywhere less than about 6 hours sleep, for me anyway, I've just found you end up turning into a zombie after about 4 or 5 days.
So do you consider yourself lucky, or is this a deliberate design choice that you created? In other words, is it just where, God just kind of like put his hand on your head and said, okay, you've got this dream life now. You've got a business that's making money. You're traveling the world. You're partying at night. You're eating cheap. You're making money in higher currency rates, taking advantage of that. Or do you think that this was something that was very deliberate, that you created? You went through a lot of crap to do it, and you made a lot of mistakes, but you figured out how to do it. Is it more the latter?
Um, I'd like to say it's more the latter. I think it's a bit of both. I'm definitely lucky. I'm lucky in the sense that I was born a Westerner. I was born with access to the internet, so that makes me luckier than about 90% of the people out there.
Hmm.
That being said, it was definitely a deliberate choice. I used to be a designer. I was an industrial designer by degree. I went for university, got the top grades there, and was planning to go and work for Apple for a while until I made the decision that actually I didn't want to do that and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've spent many years creating businesses that have failed and have cost me a substantial amount of money, which is obviously the opposite cash flow direction that I particularly want. I quit my job. It was a good job, high paid, good, well traveled. It was a risk. And so that was a deliberate choice because I'm a big advocate of kind of leaving behind the good to go for the great. It sounds quite cliched, but the life that I had before I started going traveling and started my own company was a good life, a very fortunate life, in fact, but it wasn't a great life. Mm-hmm. And I was quite willing to kind of sacrifice the good life, even if everything went wrong, in order to get the great life, which is basically kind of the life I'm living at the moment. And who knows where it will go in the future. So I think it's definitely both.
Where are you living right now? Are you back in England?
Right now, for the next month or so, I'm back in England. Again, we're just setting up a new branch of offices up in Liverpool. So I'm here trying to hire some staff and get some of the stuff sorted. And then once all that's up and running and I've got potentially a manager in place, then I'll probably head out to the Philippines.
The land of the Beatles, not the Philippines, Liverpool.
Yeah, the land of the Beatles.
I know to get your mind right, you're a big fan of podcasts. And I kind of threw this question in here because I know that this is going to be released as a podcast, and obviously people who are listening to podcasts are interested in podcasts. So, what are the hidden gem podcasts that you would recommend? What are some of your favorite ones that you like to listen to while you're on the road?
All right. Okay. Well, I'm a bit of a sad case, really, in terms of podcasts. I listen to things like the Economist podcasts and a lot of the business-minded ones. I basically go on to iTunes and downloaded a whole load from the business side and the finance side. I listen to a lot of podcasts on money and finance and where we're at in the world. I highly recommend Rich Dad, Poor Dad as a financial book, and he's got a podcast out, which is incredible. So in terms of kind of those ones, I'm pretty sad on what I listen to. However, I also highly recommend The Bugle, which is kind of a comedy. It's a mix between some American guys, an American comedian, and an English comedian, and it's very, very funny, very, very good fun.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought you'd say those two. That's really interesting. I would have picked 10 different ones for you. That's a good question. I'm going to keep asking that question. I like that. So, Jonny, the obvious question that everybody has is exactly how do you make the money to live this lifestyle design that you've created, which we will answer in the second half of our interview for our Jet Set Money members. And if you're not a member and you're listening to this right now and you want to become a member, all you have to do is go to getjetsetmoney.com. Jonny, before we go inside and go over to the members area, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do it?
Best way is probably to connect with me on my site, which is www.thelifething.com. You can basically get through to me on the comment section, send me an email. I have my personal site, which is jonnygibaud.com, and that's got all my links to everything about me on the web, basically. That's the easiest way.
Jonny, thank you so much for doing this podcast.
Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome.
That's it for this episode of the Lifestyle Design Confessions podcast. Remember, if you want to get a jump start on creating the income to live your jet set life using our proven system, you can claim your risk-free trial membership to Jet Set Money by going to getjetsetmoney.com. And remember, excuses are over. It's time to live